I encourage students to kind of make a list that would be like, what is an absolute that you want out of a school? Whether this is about location, whether it's about college size, whether it's about athletics, whether it's about cost, any of these things. So listing down, what is important to you, what is essential to your college experience. So really focusing on what do you want to experience here rather than just what do you want.
This is the Gies Download, a podcast from the University of Illinois' Gies College of Business. I'm your host, Tim Sinclair, and today we're talking with Kelly Janssen, Director of Admissions and Recruitment with the Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois. Getting into college has changed a lot over the years, and whether you're a high school student, the parent of one, or are preparing to jump back into school later in life, Kelly is the person to talk to. I have a freshman in high school, and part of me as a parent, it's my oldest, and part of me as a parent thinks he is so far away from college, I don't need to worry about anything for quite some time. And then there's another part of me that's like, oh my goodness, must start now. Kelly, help me understand sort of when and then how students and parents need to start prepping for college and the admissions process.
Yeah, I think Tim, you really hit it on the head here that there is such a variety of feelings and emotions that comes when your student hits that age where they're starting to look at colleges. And we do have families who start very early. I've had some students who are in their first year or two of high school that have come to campus visits and have reached out and asked questions, which is great. We've also had students that are going into their junior year. Typically, we'll see more students kind of look at that at the end of their junior year where they're starting to consider schools and visit campuses and really start to think about what that might look like for them. And then we have students who start their senior year where they have been busy. Obviously, we know that with events that have happened over the last few years, perhaps, personal circumstances have changed and they've had to kind of change and have conversations about what this college search process might look like. So they're starting it as a senior. And my, advice to any family is that it's really about having those open conversations with your student as early as you feel comfortable, but really being able to lay out and start to have an idea of what does the student see for their future? What can they see it? Sometimes there are students that will know right away that they want to go to a four-year university immediately out of high school. We have some students that maybe as they're looking at their process, perhaps they'd like to start at a community college or somewhere else and then look to transfer. Or maybe we even have those students when they're thinking about what to do after high school, that perhaps they're not ready to go to school at all. Maybe they'd like to go into a trade or take a gap year and really be able to work out some things as they think about what that future might look like. So encouraging families to have those conversations early on. You could do that with your freshmen right now and touch base and have those honest conversations about how the student feels, because this is really about their process. And, we always like to support the student as much as possible, whether it's from an admission standpoint or whether it's from just a family or a friend perspective, to help them feel comfortable navigating this and knowing that it's really about them and where they best see themselves suited to go is what's going to help drive some of this. So I think that overall, we are having more students look, like I said, at that junior and senior level timeline. But if your family is ready to start earlier, then you're more than welcome to do so.
What is all involved in that process, though? When you start looking into schools, obviously there's, I would assume, some initial research that most people do, but sort of talk me through what that search, investigation, research process might look like on a typical case, at least, from beginning to end.
I think that a lot of times students can get engaged and interested in that college search process based upon perhaps conversations that they've had with family or friend members, or even their peers, their high school counselors. So when they kind of start to get an idea of, yeah, maybe I'd like to go to college and kind of starting to research, I think it depends upon the student's approach and what's going to work best for them. So you're right in thinking about the timelines. For many colleges, applying happens during that senior year in high school, especially in the first fall semester of that school. So making sure that you're keeping that in mind. But really, as you said, there is some research that's involved. We encourage students to, think about, make a list of what's going to be important to you. What do you think would initially attract you to a school? and being able to look up some of those online, or to actually visit campus. Here at the University of Illinois, we have lots of families that have come to visit school because they had a relative who came to school down here, or perhaps they came down for an athletic event or for a community event, those types of things. So it's thinking about what's going to engage a student with the school and make them think about what do they want to experience during that college timeline. So looking at doing some research. There's a lot of information online, certain websites that you can go to that would help students keep track of, what schools are they interested in and what are those application timelines? What are the costs involved? Because, there are costs that come into play for those applications as well as for visiting campuses. So thinking about a student, if you're interested in being in state or if you're looking out of state, what does that campus visit potentially look like? I would say too that, when we're thinking about those earlier years, visiting campuses early is helpful. I think that for some students, they may take the approach of just applying to any school that they're interested in. I had one student who applied to 23 different schools and got admitted into 20 of them. And then she really had to narrow down her selection process in that spring semester so that she could determine what the best fit would be for her. For other students, they start it earlier and they're really intentional about what schools that they're applying to, based upon some of those conversations that they've had with their families about, what is important to me? How do I want to approach this process? And in the end, how is this going to help me figure out where I'd like to be? So we have students who come and they have an Excel spreadsheet that lists out the schools, and they are keeping track of both the things that they really like about a school and also things that they don't like when they realize those things. So again, being intentional about those applications, and that also will help a student narrow down their search process in the beginning so that when they get those admission decisions, they know that those are the real contenders and that they've already discussed these types of things broadly with their support group about whether this would be a good fit for them. So doing some research and visits early on, I do encourage students to look at visiting schools. I think that interacting with current students and seeing if you fit into the size of the campus and the student body and the culture and also, weather. That's a big factor. We're in central Illinois. So how do all of these things align for you, both when you're applying, but then also when you get those admission decisions? Admissions has a couple of different routes. Different schools use different processes. So as those admission decisions come out, you can really take a look at your list and then also gather more information because that tide is flipped. You're not worrying about whether the school is going to select you. It's more about whether you're going to select that school and if it's a best fit for you, that you can start asking those really important questions to get you down into like kind of the basic list of what's going to work best for you and making that final decision.
Typically, it sounds like in the fall of a student's senior year is when admissions opens in most schools. Is that correct?
Traditionally, it's going to be a student who applies during their senior year, and then they would get an admission decision anytime during that timeline. So there are some schools who use rolling admissions, and you might get an admission decision relatively quickly after that. There are those schools like we do where we have set admission dates where we release those admission decisions to students. So it just depends upon the individual school.
How long am I going to have to make a decision? Let's say my student applies in the fall as a senior, and then gets admitted to 5 schools. Am I forced to make or help them make an admission decision immediately, or how long do you have to accept, deny? Again, I'm sure it's different for everybody, but just sort of in generalities, how does that play out?
It is different. So there are some schools that are binding schools. So that means that if they are an early decision school, they are on a consortium of schools where if a student applies to one of those schools in the fall and they are admitted, that means that they are binded to go to that school. It means they withdraw all of their other applications, and that's the school of their choice. Students really only do that if they know 100% this is the school that they would like to go to. There's very few schools who do that, though, when you think about how many schools are available across the nation and globally. For schools like ours, we have something that's called early action. So we have different timelines for students to apply and when they might get that admission decision. However, May 1st is the national deadline date for a student to let a school know if they're going to attend there or not. So the majority of schools would have, an open timeline there for students to be able to make that decision by May 1st. And most schools, that's when in the spring they host open houses and they have larger visit programs for admitted students to come and attend. So then that way students can get a feel and say, sure, I could definitely see myself in this student body. This is where I'd like to go to school.
So let's talk about exactly what you just mentioned, the admission decisions and how schools decide who gets in and who doesn't. Obviously, some are way more loose, some are incredibly strict. But what are some of the things that you are looking at and looking for when you're going through all these applications?
Yes. So, as you mentioned, there are some schools where admission decisions might be open. For example, community colleges are open for any student for enrollment. When we look at other schools, particularly some selective schools, there's a variety of ways that a school might approach building their student cohort. So, there are some schools that would be looking to admit students based upon test scores and GPAs. Those are the two factors that they would use for admission decisions. Other schools may admit a student into a university, and then maybe you're considered for a specific major or program. Here at the University of Illinois, we admit students, if possible, directly into the program of their first choice. So at Gies, we are a direct admit program. So if students apply as a first-year student, they would apply to business undeclared and come into our program directly as a student. That way, we also take in transfer students through applying to specific majors, but they are directly admitted into our school. And our process is unique because we do use a holistic approach, because we recognize that there are both academic and non-academic factors that could contribute to a student's applications that would make them a very competitive applicant and also that would make them a desirable student to have as a part of our community. So when we consider our admission application factors, we're looking at academics, which means that we will take into consideration the students' classes that they've taken, the grades that they've received in those specific classes, as well as the rigor of those courses. What's great about it too is that we actually do it within the school's high school context. So, for example, if a student submits an application, we are able to see not only the factors that I just mentioned, but we also are able to see which high school that they attended. So we're putting it into context. For example, I went to a high school that had less than 150 students in my graduating class versus those students, like another student who may have 1,000 students in their graduating class. So being able to look at those academic factors, not just for the grades that they're receiving, but also like what was available to them within their high school. How does all of this fit into the opportunities there academically? And what the student has decided to do in terms of taking those classes. Now, the other side of that then are the non-academic factors. So we do have students submit a couple of essays for us. One, because we are applying directly to specific majors within the university. So that helps us gauge if the student is applying to the right major, first of all, because sometimes they might slip and accidentally click the wrong button. But also that, what is the student's interest? What do they see themselves having as goals in the future? What experiences have they had that might lend them to being a part of this academic community? So we have them write a few essays based on those topics. They also are able to include any additional information about honors and awards that they've received. Involvement in activities that they've had. So this could be anything from athletics to student clubs and organizations to a part-time job to family responsibilities if they need to take care of younger siblings or something like that. So being able to see all of the things that the students has balanced between their academics and also their personal and professional endeavors that are there. And the last part is that we do have some optional essays for students to submit if they feel inclined to do so. Especially over the last few years, life has happened and things can be really challenging. So allowing the student to share some information with the admission review committee on that application to take into context along with all of the factors that are already included there, whether that could be explaining a family situation, or if perhaps a student had a challenging semester for grades and they wanted to provide some context for that. It's about allowing the review committee to see the entire student application and to make a decision based upon those factors.
It feels like back in the day, and showing my age here a little bit, that it was you don't need to work, you don't need to join drama or chess or band or whatever. We're just going to focus on your grades so you can get into a good school. That may not be very accurate anymore from what you're saying. Is that true?
Yeah, I think the biggest part is that, admission applications are going up, and that, it means that admission is becoming more competitive. And so when we're looking at students, we have a lot of really well qualified academic students who apply to the university and specifically to Gies. And so, when we do look at a student, I would say that it would make my job a lot easier if admission decisions were based, just on a few very standard measures. But in this context, there is that bigger picture, and that is important to look at. I would say too that, sometimes, especially if a student's looking at selective business schools, students might feel pressured to take business courses or to be involved in, business student clubs and organizations. And they'll ask me, well, does that give us an advantage in admission? Is that more helpful? And when we're reviewing the holistic approach, it's not going to give a student a specific advantage. Some schools don't even offer business clubs and organizations or business courses. It might provide the student with some great experiences that they can use to write about in those application essays, but it's not going to give them an advantage in them. And a part of it is to, as we look at the admissions process, knowing that a student is considering a variety of different majors and interest areas, that's where those involvement and other things come into play. That having some diversity there is great, as long as those things are based upon the student's true interest and what that they would like to do.
When I applied to the architecture school at Illinois back, again, long time ago, don't need to give numbers, I remember a chart, and it was GPA on one axis and ACT scores on the other axis, and you would take your GPA and follow it over to your ACT score, and if you were in the good area, then you could be accepted, and if you weren't, you couldn't. And I could see why that would make your job a lot easier, but I do think that times have changed, and all for the better.
One thing that I didn't mention in our factor there, and I'm glad that you brought this up, Tim, is about the test scores. So, when it comes to submitting test scores, there are still some schools that are test required, which is what we used to be, where a student had to submit either an SAT or an ACT score as part of their admission review. At this point, we are test optional, which means that if a student has taken an SAT or an ACT and they look at the scores and they say, yes, I think these are great scores, I think that they would help round out my admission application review, I'd like to include them in the admission review, then they can select to do so in their application. If a student takes a test and, they don't feel confident in those scores for whatever reason, and they decide not to include it as part of their admission review, then they can select not to do so on their application. And so I think that's where it's kind of like if you're building your own pizza and you look at an ingredient, you're like, yeah, I really want that on there. I think this will make this a better, a better meal for me. Then they can include it. But if they decide not to, then there's no penalty or disadvantage for a student to do that. So when we talk about ACTs and SATs and GPAs, I'll have a lot of families who say, so what is the cutoff? Or, what type of test score do I need to get in? Or what's your minimum GPA? And for us, I will share that, GPA honestly doesn't mean anything to me because some schools have a weighted scale, some schools have unweighted, some might be on a 4.0 scale, some might be on a 5.0 scale. So that's where when we go and we look at that academic review, we're really considering the classes that the student has taken as well as the actual grades in those classes so that you're seeing that potentially there is that difference between getting an A in physical ed versus getting an A in AP bio.
Now, once your job is done and you've sent out the acceptance letters or emails or however you notify students that they've gotten in, how do these students begin making the best decision for them, assuming that there's been 2 or 3 or 10 or 12 acceptance letters? You've addressed some of these things already, but what should families really be looking at as they make their final decision?
I think that for families, as I mentioned before, it's kind of that tide is turning, and it is an opportunity to learn more about those environments that you might be going into. And so being able to delve in and ask questions of the admissions counselors of the university that you're looking to attend connect with current students as much as possible. In our office, we have a good number of student interns that work directly for our unit, as well as student ambassadors. I mean, this year I have 160 students this fall who are Gies students who are volunteering their time and their efforts to help connect with those prospective families to get them the information that they're looking for. And so that's really about, the student community and what do you feel is important to you? I encourage, students to kind of make a list that would be like, what is an absolute that you want out of a school? Whether this is about location, whether it's about college size, whether it's about athletics, whether it's about cost, any of these things. So listing down, what is important to you, what is essential to your college experience. So really focusing on what do you want to experience here rather than just what do you want. So you have your non-negotiables, absolutely need these. Then you have those things that they would be nice to have, but maybe you could compromise if they weren't there, and then that's okay. There are those things that are neutral, where students say, I don't care, that's fine, that doesn't matter to me, or things that they know that they really don't want. And this, I think, is a side that is important to really focus in on, because it's easy to get caught up in looking at schools that have things that you want, because there's a lot of those out there. But being able to narrow down and say, I know I don't want this, then that's going to help with that process too, and keep it from being so overwhelming that you're narrowing it down. Referring back to the menu, example that I provided earlier, if there's something that that you don't want, put it to the side. Don't look at it, no matter whether it's got really good side options like fries or anything. Put it aside. Somebody else will be a good fit for that, but it's not for you, so that this can help you continue on in your search. So being able to connect as much as possible with the community and seeing if it's right for you. I also think that, when we look at this, that's where it goes back to those open conversations with the families and being able to say, what is realistic for us? What does your pathway look like? Because there are multiple ways to get into schools. I think that when we talk specifically about Gies, ours isn't just about first year students coming in directly into the college from high school. We do have conversations with families that perhaps financially it's best for them to start at a community college. And so we have an off-campus transfer process that we work with students on so that they can come into the college that way. Or students who start here at the university in a different major or program, and then they'd like to transfer into the college. We also have that as well. But being able to really help have those open conversations so that it doesn't feel overwhelming, particularly because as students get admission decisions, like you said, Tim, they could have a lot of really positive decisions that they're excited about, but inevitably there's probably going to be some decisions that are really disappointing. And so being able to ride through that emotional roller coaster with the student and say, yeah, this was really tough. I'm sorry that this didn't work out for you. But to help them get excited about the ones that they did get into. And again, seeing how does this fit for you? Is this a great place for you to go? Getting them excited and keeping them on that path really helps out. I think the last thing that I recommend to families, because I have had some conversations over my 5 years in this role with some families who are really looking for this one nugget that just says, okay, so this is the one thing that you're going to tell me. Why should I go to school here? And there really isn't one nugget. I think that there's so many different great schools out there and different schools that could be applicable and appropriate for students. So what I share with them is that if you're really struggling between a few schools, it's really simple, but it can be really effective. Take out a quarter and put one school on one side of it and put another school on the other. Have the student close their eyes, you flip the quarter, it lands on the ground, and you open your eyes and see how you feel. It's that gut check, so that if you are looking down at the school and you think, man, I want to flip this again, that's telling you something. Or if you look at it and you're excited about that opportunity, that's also telling you something. Because, we can have great statistics and you can have, all of these wonderful programs and all of the things that you think that you're looking for, but really it's based a lot on emotions.
Obviously, Kelly, you are an employee of the University of Illinois and of the Gies College of Business, so obviously you're going to be biased. That's totally fine. What is it that you see about the Gies experience overall that is unique, that is better, that would be a selling point for why somebody should at least start the application process?
overall, Tim, too, I think that my role and my team's role, and I have said this from when I started this job, um, that our job isn't actually to sell the Gies College of Business. Our job is to help students determine, what is going to be the best fit for them and what information do they need to find that out. And so when we talk about, what is the Gies experience like, these are things that I have them think about in context of all of the schools that they're looking at. So, sometimes when we think about what's important in a school, what are their values? What type of student body will you be enmeshed with? And, what is inherent to their type of student experience? So some schools value tradition. Some schools value prestige. Some schools are a little bit more competitive in nature. Our school in particular is really known for being a fun, collaborative, friendly community. We're very open. And that's something that I really appreciate, both working with the students who are interested in the school, but also working with our current students. I mean, 160 student volunteers, I can't beat that. And it's because of the type of culture that our students have here. I also think that because we are a direct admit school, but it is not direct admission into a specific program. So, for example, our first year students, if you're going onto the application, even if you know that you're interested in marketing, for example, you would not find marketing as a major to apply to under the College of Business. All of our students come in as business undeclared. And so this is designed intentionally for students to come in and be able to explore, take some classes in marketing and management and, technology and accounting, finance, these different areas so that a student can really find where are their strengths and where are their interests and how do those align? We've had some students who come in and say, I know that I want to be an investment banker. And then they take the first corporate class and they can come out and say, yes, that was awesome. I am on the right path. Or other students might say, wow, that was not what I expected it to be. I want to see what other majors are out there. And so we have, a lot of support for students to come in with specific classes that they can take to be able to learn about those different majors. We have an excellent career and professional development office that works with students as early as their freshman year, helping them learn about the types of majors and how those correlate with different careers that they can pursue. You want to do a job shadow for a manager at a large company? Awesome. Let's help align that for you. Helping them find the right internships and full-time employment and negotiating salaries and all of those types of things. And also our academic advisors and peer advisors. They're here to help students take the right classes, move forward in that degree progression, and feel really comfortable in taking the time to pick the right major for them, or two majors, and or a minor or other things, but being able to make sure that they're moving forward with that graduation timeline and being able to graduate on time. And a last thing I would note that I really appreciate about our school and our community is that we really have built in a lot of hands-on learning for students. So experiential learning is really important and core to our students. We have a cohort sequence of classes that every student takes. So Business 101 is for introductory first year students to learn about the majors, the careers, professional responsibility and ethics, those types of things, which is crucial for that foundation in business. But also as they move into that sequence, during their junior year, Business 301, that's specifically simulated where students are put into consulting groups and they work directly with a client or a firm and organization to help them solve a business problem or to do some market research. But they're getting that hands-on experience built right into their classes so that they have something tangible to help them, A, again, figure out what are their strengths and their interests and how do those align, but also B, to give them that real-world experience and to say, yes, this is something that I want to do, so that when they do go into internships or into their full-time employment, they're much more well equipped to do so and have a variety of backgrounds that will complement both their initial starting career, but also give them some fluidity and flexibility as they might move into other roles.
You have a difficult job. It is a highly competitive school to get into at Gies and has gotten even more so with the IMBA program. You get to say yes to, thousands, I would assume, each year, but probably have to say no to many thousands more than that. How do you, when you go home at the end of the day, what is it that helps you take your mind off of the hard parts of your job, or how do you deal with that? Because I would imagine, because it's not just a if this, then this kind of proposition, there's no equation. that can wear on you a little bit, I would think.
It does. And I appreciate that, Tim. I think, one thing that's really big in the admissions space is this concept of grace and empathy and understanding. We share that a lot with the families that we work with because, as I mentioned, yes, there are a lot of great decisions that we're able to release and the excitement that comes along with that. But we also do have really difficult conversations with families when it comes to decisions that weren't what they were hoping for. And so being able to understand that this admissions college search process is an emotional roller coaster for the students and for their families, and also for anyone else who is involved. So the high school counselors, community college counselors, and also admissions staff as well. And so, uh, I will say it's getting harder and harder to make those admission decisions because there are so many exceptional students that could do really well here at our university and in our college, and that unfortunately we just don't have the space to be able to admit students. But I think that overall for me, that matter of being able to extend grace to the families, to listen to them, to hear them, and to help talk about those alternative paths. And I know that that's not always going to be the answer for everyone. There are students that, if they're not admitted directly into college, they might decide to go to another university or school. And also that there aren't always going to be answers that are satisfactory. And I certainly understand that. But knowing that at the end of the day, that hopefully a student will be able to find a place where, they really can see themselves being happy, healthy, and successful. And that, they are on their own journey. Because they receive an admission decision from us that is not what they were hoping for, it doesn't mean that that's the end of their college journey, that hopefully they will go on to attend a different university and school and build on that. And maybe they would come back to us for a master's program or, something else. But, really feeling as though at the end of the day that we have really taken the time and being intentional about building out those student cohorts and understanding that, the admissions process can be really challenging on some levels, though it can feel really, really personal, but it doesn't have to be that personal and stressful and concerned. So I do my best. There are some really, really difficult days. I can certainly say that. But overall, I think it's the joy that we see on the students that we are able to help. And even those that perhaps we aren't able to admit, if we are able to share information with them that helps them along their college journey, then we've done our job.
To begin the admissions process at Illinois, check out admissions.illinois.edu. Or to learn more about the Gies College of Business, go to giesbusiness.illinois.edu. And be sure to join us again for the next Gies Download.